We need Kong. The world needs him, but what the world didn't need was a half-baked figure as our first impression. Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. My name is Matthew, and today we're taking a look at the first giant-sized Kong figure from Playmates from the Godzilla vs. Kong line. Well, technically speaking, it was our only one, but this was our first look at the Godzilla vs. Kong design, where he would later be sporting several things such as a beard and just overall much more chunky proportions compared to his 2017 1973 in canon counterpart. But with that said, if you guys are longtime viewers of the channel, you guys might remember this guy from being the, I think, 10th spot on the list of like my least favorite Godzilla and Kong figures. And that was because, well, I might as well save it, but do I really still stand by that? Judging from that intro part, you can kind of tell what my actual thoughts are. But with that said, let's go ahead and take a look at the Playmates Giant Kong from Godzilla vs. Kong 2021. So starting off with the sculpt and paint, which since spoilers, there is no accessories to actually go with this figure. It should be worth noting that technically, so to speak, this is going to be based on an early like render of Kong, and they dulled down that said render to make it more like of their, I guess you could say, for kids, like toys. Like it's basically just dulled down for a cheap $20 kids toy. That said, it very much shows with the head sculpt, which I can actually say the head sculpt actually ain't that bad. I kind of dig it a lot. For the face, we have the eyes, which are going to be painted a variety of different colors, which we have a black, orange, and yellow kind of themage going on with there. The nostrils are not going to be too all that impressive, being just little divots in there, but the mouth is actually kind of cool because it's the closed mouth head sculpt, which we would later see on the Kong fighter jet figure and the Hong Kong battle variant, and I also think the Antarctic, whatever, they made like a billion Kongs. Which we actually have the snaggletooth variant here, which we have one of the tooth kind of like peering out and the other one kind of showing up, but it's not like past the lip. But what's actually kind of cool is that it's all sprayed white, but you can kind of see that there's a bit of depth there because you can kind of see like the back of the mouth there. If you look at it from this side, it actually like reveals a bit more of the mouth. So there's a bit of dimension with that, and that's actually kind of cool. That's like one of the few things I actually like absolutely dig about this thing, like totally. As for the rest of the head, you get some fair amount of fur details, all like spiky bits of the hair here. We have the ears, which are going to be off to the sides. I don't know what that is. I think that's just broken down sculpt, because that is not from me. We have the beard, which is actually going to be pretty, not a spiky beard, but it is kind of like hard end, so it might poke some eyes, especially if you like twist the head 180. And I don't know, I have seen some relatives of mine actually do that, so there's that of note. For the actual like rest of the head, there's really not much to talk about. It's probably the most well detailed thing here. And you're also going to notice that the rest of the body is going to be colored basically the same thing, but we'll get to that in just a sec. For the pecs, they're actually going to be smoothened out black and almost look like a different shade of black. That looks more like a charcoal. This one looks more like a solid, but it is going to be more smoothened out details with the slashes, one there, and one there, painted on as like a beige or whatever kind of color that is, like a very, 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 very dull, almost yellow grayish mix. And honestly, I would have preferred them if they were sculpted, but it is what it is. The fur detail actually looks pretty well done here, which we do have a bit of a belly button there. And does kind of transition well from the actual like black spray. Going to the back here, which we can see screw hole after screw hole after screw hole. I grew up with toys with screw holes, so I wouldn't really mind these, honestly. So that's why I'm not really critiquing them. What I will critique is, in my personal opinion, though the detail looks great, it just lacks a theme of paint. In fact, relatively speaking, the pecs slashes in the face, those are the only painted bits on this figure. And even then, I don't know if the pecs are really painted. They could just be a smoothened out plastic, because that can happen. Anyway, for the shoulders, which are going to be big and muscular, like, this is a big boy. Like, Kong really was working out between 1973 and 2024 in canon. The actual fur detail looks absolutely sick and just looks so wavy. It looks very, very fuzzy. And you can just tell it's like old and more shelled out compared to his 2017 counterparts. The wrists here definitely have a bit more like what the chest has, more darkened out, shiny black with more like mellowish detail. And this one's kind of open, which is weird because it doesn't have anything to hold. I guess just to accommodate the sculpt of the original 6-inch, so all Kongs don't have to have like this one has closed fist, the other ones have open fist, and Playmates doesn't have to put in the extra work. But this one has the clenched fist and kind of more or less the same kind of details. You get the fingernail, you get the kind of like folds and wrinkles in the skin. It's basically just kind of basic stuff, monkey booty. And for the legs, which are going to be a lot more thickened this time around as compared to the 2017 variants, a lot more fur detail kind of going down towards the sides as well. A little bit more smoothed out where it gets to the same. But the back side actually looks a bit well done with the fur. It almost looks like tree bark. Doesn't it? It almost looks like a tree. But yeah, just to give you like a bit of another look, kneecaps look pretty alright. They're not like all that noticeable, but the feet, again, the sculpt work is pretty decent on this thing. Definitely more or less smoothened out detail work here for the bottom of the feet, but the top, you still got the nails, you know, they're still there. And yeah, that's basically like it. Let's have one more look at the actual like front. Hold on. Actually hitting the big Godzilla, Titan Godzilla back there. The side profile, the back profile, underneath, from above, and back to the front. So for the Giant Kong sculpt and paints, I'm going to be honest and say that while I think it's cool that you know, the sculpt work, I would say I don't have like any major gripes given the price point and what Playmates is trying to do here. In fact, that snaggletooth mouth is actually kind of cool. However, what I'm not so much of a fan of is the lack there of color. Also, it's the wrong color. Yeah, let me just say this. Kong was never a charcoal gray. He was never a dark colored character. He was always more brownish, not really red, but he was more of like, his fur was always more brownish. This is not that color. It's definitely more so a charcoal gray. I don't know why Playmates opted to go for this route, especially because like even the earliest source materials never depicted Kong as like this more darker colored character. This color almost looks more appropriate for Godzilla. And it's funny because they've actually produced some Godzillas that are of this color. Kong though, this just never looked right to me. I think the only like time where Kong was really darkened was like in scenes in the dark. I guess maybe like the scene on the aircraft carrier with Gia, or maybe like the Hong Kong fight. But really, the thing about those is that Kong was illuminated by those scenes. He was illuminated by the light ship, and he was illuminated by everything in Hong Kong. And we know what a Playmates Hong Kong battle Kong is supposed to look like thanks to the 6-inch figure. So what this figure is really supposed to be, I don't know. Which is why it's just so confusing and, in my personal opinion, lazy. It's not only the wrong color, but there's barely any of it. There's not that much paint, even for a Playmates figure. It's just the face and the scars. That's really it. And like, I really feel like this figure could have used some form of dry brush, which is ultimately why, spoilers, that's kind of the reason why this thing gets to like lower on my list for like top favorite Playmates Godzilla and Kong figures, because as we're about to see in comparisons, this guy's kind of outdated. But For the actual sculpt and paint, I think the sculpt is pretty decent. The paint, just flat out no. So I'm going to give this thing a 5.5 out of 10 for sculpt and paint. So for articulation, we have actually a decent bit. We have a rotation here at the head, which, much like I mentioned earlier, that it's actually decently sharp and actually can jab you. The shoulders here can go a full 360, as well as a full 360 at the wrist. Same with both sides, just to demonstrate. Don't worry, I didn't break anything. It just kind of makes that noise anyway. Let's move the arms up and go to the legs. This leg can go a full 360. Same with this one. And full 360 here at the foot. Just like so. Yeah, there we go. This one's a little tight. It's definitely going to be a little stiff. So that's basically it for articulation. There's really not a whole lot as far as like action figure versus kids toy. But here's what I will say. At the time, this was pretty decent. You know, you got what you needed. You had a head joint, you had arm joints, wrist joints, hip joints, and foot joints. Okay, cool. What makes this guy significantly outdated? I know, I would save our comparisons for the end, but this figure was released like, what, 3 or 4 years after this? And while I am gonna like consider this as like an improvement versus this one, this guy has all the bells and whistles more so than him. He has not only a swivel, but a ball joint here at the head. He has swivel hinges for the shoulders, joints at the elbows, swivel hinges for the hips, and bendable knees. The only thing that this guy doesn't have that this guy does is a foot swivel. If that was there, this would be the best Playmates Kong figure by far. But, I mean, it kind of already is, in my personal opinion. But there's just, strictly judging this on its own, it's fine. You know, it's serviceable. It's about the same as you get with, like, a Bandai vinyl or a then Playmates. But as for 2025, there's a clearly better option to buy than this guy is. So I'm going to say 6.5 out of 10 for the articulation. So for some brief size comparisons, here he is compared to some miscellaneous figures with the, I just showed off the giant Kong from 2024's Godzilla Kong the New Empire, and the derpy Godzilla on the channel, as you guys know him, or the 1989 Diamond Select Bust Bank from Godzilla vs. Biollante. And which is funny because there's actually a full body version of this guy that would actually be about, I think, up to here, just where the tip of my finger is. You can kind of see it, but just right there in the scale. So maybe I might pick that up one day. I just have to find a seller that's willing to sell for a good price. And next up, here he is compared to the Kong Skull Island Giant Kong from 2017, and his technically speaking counterpart, the Giant Godzilla from 2021's Godzilla vs. Kong. And I haven't re-reviewed this guy yet, but let me just ask, why did Godzilla get the better treatment than Kong did? And finally, here he is with some 6-inch standard figures with Kong with Battle Axe and Godzilla with Heat-Ray. And so overall, what do I think about this guy? I'm gonna be a bit honest. It's hard for me to recommend this. Not because I think that this is worst figure of the year material, because there are some redeeming qualities about him, like his sculpt work and his posability. But that said, his posability is outdated when you compare it to what would come later, and his paint from the get-go was honestly kind of lazy. That's really the big problem here. I feel like this figure had a lot more potential of being the big deluxe Kong figure that, in my personal opinion, no pun intended, the world really needed, but sadly, this wasn't it. I think the 2017 Kong was just a lot better of an executed figure even for the time, and it kind of confuses me why that figure was such a big rush job, yet it somehow ended up being better than the figure that was brewing from the very beginning of Playmates' master license. I just have a bit of questions, and unfortunately I'm never going to get the answers to them. However, what we found out later with the new Empire is that there's a much better adult legendary Kong figure out there that surpasses this thing in every way. Sculpt and paint, articulation, and even has a beast glove. Now maybe for those that just want like a blank Kong, okay, maybe I can see this thing going through, but at that point you might as well just get the 2017 variant because again, it just looks better. It's maybe not more movie accurate to its source material than this one does, but really I feel like the only reason to go back to this thing is if you're trying to hunt down all the Godzilla vs. Kong stuff from Playmates, or you just want to have the two giant Godzilla and Kong stepping against each other with mechagodzilla thrown in the middle, of which I don't own. That's a good enough reason to buy this, but at the same time, I feel like there's just better options, you know? Well, so for my final score, I'm going to give this thing a 5.7 out of 10. It's just almost down the middle between a 6 and a 5.5. It's somewhere down there. Anyways, that's all I have for this video. If you enjoyed it, leave a like and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys next time where we review Godzilla himself. Peace out, everyone.